Everything we need is in this room. We've got to work together, whether we the team, no one can Stop it. Throw it to the end zone for Robinson. A touchdown. We come to practice, we practice hard. We tell you we be honest and we gonna make games,
All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Commander's Film Room. George Carmi, of course, is here in the co-host chair, and as always, we've got Mark Bullock here to break down all of the film. We'll be running these all off season long, so let us know who you want us to talk about next. Today, we'll start with the coaching search, and it looks like the leader in the clubhouse is Ben Johnson. So that's who we'll look at today. Mark, you got the film. Let's get into it.
Yeah, so Ben Johnson's the main talking point of the NFL at the moment in terms of head coaching candidates, and the Lions' offense the past few years has been really good. And obviously, last year he was in the kind of hiring cycle and turned down some opportunities. Notably, the Panthers one, he turned that down and decided to go back to Detroit, and he improved on what he did last year, and his offense looks really good. So I thought we would take a little look at some of the things that he does offensively, and I wrote an article about him, and I'm going to go over a fair bit of what I did on Monday in that article. So,
and we'll link in the comments. We'll link the Substack so that people can go back and check it out.
Fantastic read for sure. Yeah. Definitely.
So one thing some people had in response to the article I wrote was they wanted to know specifically what kind of run schemes he does. So I thought we'd start with some run scheme stuff, and then we'll get into more thematic stuff. And in terms of run schemes, the Lions are more of a gap-based run scheme rather than zone. That doesn't mean they don't run zone. They do. They actually run a fair bit of zone stuff, but they do also like to run gap scheme stuff. And so I thought I would start out showing a few little gap scheme runs just to give an example of what those type of gap scheme runs are. And this was actually the Lions' first play of the entire season back in week 1 against the Chiefs. And they opened up with what's known as a duo scheme, where the idea is that you get the double team blocks on these two defensive tackles. They don't quite manage that here because this defensive tackle is shaded inside, so the right tackle can't get to him before going up to the linebacker. But the idea is that you get your double teams on the defensive tackles and you drive them back towards the linebackers, and then one of the two will peel off and block the linebacker. And it's very much a downhill run. The running back gets downhill immediately, and he's essentially reading the Mike linebacker. And however the Mike linebacker fills the run, the running back will bounce his run elsewhere. So we'll run this one on, and you'll see. You get your double team here to the left of the side of the offensive line. The right guard picks up the nose tackle, and then the right tackle in an ideal world would be able to help on that, but because this guy goes inside, he immediately has to go up to the linebacker, and then you got your running back running downhill, reading this Mike linebacker, and because that linebacker is trapped inside, he's going to hit that hole right in miles of space. And then he'll just get as vertical as he can, as quick as he can. And we'll see it from the end zone angle here again. You get your double team here. You get, ideally, you have a double team here. But the guard does a nice job picking up the nose tackle one-on-one. And I think that's Sewell that is the right tackle going up, getting the linebacker, goes and makes the block. And you can see this running lane is huge. You don't normally get a running lane anywhere that big on duo runs, but they managed it here, and he hit it well. So that's a very basic gap scheme.
And Washington will remember those duos from Gruden, right? It feels like, didn't he run a ton of the duo?
Yeah, Gruden, when
and Turner as well, right?
Scott Turner ran duo. Duo is a very common run scheme in the NFL. Everyone runs duo to different levels, but a lot of them ran duo. So it's not a new scheme. Eric Bieniemy's run duo this year and stuff, but This is another one. So this one is counter, where it's designed to look a lot like power, and you have the guard here pulling and kicking out on the edge, and then the tight end follows him and wraps around to pick up the linebacker, and then your running back is running inside out. So he's ideally aiming for this A gap because these guys are all going to be blocking down inside, and then he just reads out a gap. So if this gap is plugged, then he goes out a gap. If that gap is plugged, he goes out another gap. And so we'll run this one on here. They have a little jet sweep fake into it. You see the guard pulling. He kicks out the defensive end real nice. You got the tight end pulling around for the linebacker. He wraps around and gets him. And then that leaves this nice crease for the running back to hit that. And then he makes a nice move to make another guy miss and get into the end zone. And again, we'll get the end zone angle of that. The other angle, sorry. And again, you're going to get the left guard pulling, kicking out this edge guy. The tight end's going to follow and wrap around for the linebacker. And you're just going to get a real nice crease right in the middle of the defense there. And then he's fantastic blocking, and he's going to make a nice cut to beat that safety and get into the end zone for the touchdown. And then one more, a little.
Go ahead, Mark.
Go ahead.
I was going to say one of the appealing parts about Ben Johnson is that he's balanced, right? I feel like everyone likes him because he has a great rushing attack as well as a great passing attack. I like the match between his offense in Washington, because I do see some parallels with David Montgomery and Brian Robinson, like power back, that shiftiness there. I'm kind of curious, what are your thoughts on the offensive lineman? Because I know, like, with zone blocking schemes, you have to be more agile, more on your toes. I know Sam Cosby could probably do pretty well with that. I know power blocking is more like the big hulking kind of guys. Do you think Washington's offensive line is capable of that right now? I know there's going to be an overhaul anyway, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think certain personnel will suit that better. The big Charles Leno will probably suit the kind of gap scheme stuff. Okay. Cosme is capable of it. The issue we've looked at Cosme on here before, and the issue he has is when he pulls, he kind of stops his feet and then lunges at blockers when he's trying to block in space. But pretty much everything else he does pretty well. So you feel like with some better coaching, he should just learn to take his momentum and run guys over, because he's certainly very capable of doing that. So I think Cosme is pretty scheme diverse. He can fit anything. Stromberg, if you're looking at him as potential future center, might struggle a little bit, because he's a little bit more of a lighter guy. But maybe he can add some weight to that frame. And then you get and at center you can get away with a bit of a lighter guy. But he's still, I believe he was under 300 pounds at the combine. So, and then obviously he's had a year in the NFL and stuff, so that could have changed, but he might struggle a little bit. Chris Paul certainly is someone that would definitely benefit playing in a gap scheme rather than zone. He struggled in zone stuff. Andrew Wiley is in terms of run blocking, he's very good in gap scheme stuff. So he's someone that maybe if you shifted him across to left guard and you found a new right tackle, that would fit. So there's some pieces that could work. I think, as you said, there's probably going to be a bit of an overhaul anyway. So they will probably try to find some guys that will fit it. But it's not that Johnson exclusively runs gap scheme stuff, that there's plenty of zone stuff in there. So you need the flexibility to be able to do both. But they definitely use more gap scheme stuff than what we've seen Washington do in the past. And they lean into more diverse gap scheme stuff. So like this play I've got drawn up here is a trap scheme that we haven't seen in Washington run very frequently. They occasionally run it. I think Scott Turner ran it once or twice last year. But basically, it's designed to look like a power run with the guard pulling across, and these two both kind of fake blocking as a double team on this defensive tackle, but then they both fake the block and then peel around him and arc around him and then go block guys in the secondary. And this puller, instead of going out to the edge, comes in a gap and blocks this guy. And so this guy feels like he's going to get blocked by these two. So is surprised by not getting blocked by them, and then suddenly is hit by the pulling guard. And it's a really nice scheme. And you'll see it here. Gets that nice hit, and then they've got this just huge running lane right up the middle of the defense, and Montgomery hits it nicely for a pretty nice gain. So, and this is the other angle of it. You see he's kind of surprised by not getting blocked by either one of those, and then he's eyeing in the backfield, thinking, okay, I've got a free run here, and then suddenly he's trapped and kicked out, and you've got this huge lane. The only thing in front of him really is his own blocker. So yeah, it's a nice scheme. It's a real nice change up, and if you run a lot of gap scheme stuff, then that kind of thing you fit into the scheme very nicely. So that was just a little preview of some of the gap scheme stuff that he does like to run. As I say, he does run plenty of zone stuff as well, but he does favor, or certainly in Detroit because of the personnel they have, and Dan Campbell's kind of philosophy of being a run first, kind of run it down your throat kind of coach. He uses more gap scheme stuff there. So
hey, Mark, what?
Yeah.
I think some people will hear names like Slowick and be able to relate it to Shanahan and get an idea of what the scheme might look like. Do you have a feel? What is the Ben Johnson? Where is he from? And what can we kind of in our minds picture the same way? You know what I mean? Like, is there somebody we can compare it to that we're familiar with maybe?
Well, he's not in the same kind of trees. He does go back to, he credits, I can't remember the name of the coach, but it was a coach on one of John Gruden's old staffs. And he credits that guy for a lot of his offensive philosophy. So I guess there's some similarities to a John Gruden scheme from just watching it, and I'll get into it a little bit as we go through a few of these clips. Thematically, it is kind of similar to Kyle Shanahan in the way that he schemes things up for players and kind of ties things together, and the different layers he puts on things. And actually that's something we've got here where when you think of like Kyle Shanahan's offense, you think of, they run that wide zone scheme to get into the bootleg stuff, and then they fake the bootleg and they run a screen, and then they fake the screen and they run a drop back play action pass, and they have these different layers to add on top, all from the same look, and it builds a nice little package of plays. And that is something that stood out to me immediately when watching Ben Johnson's offenses, is that he has these real nice packages of plays, and this is just an example of one. And he does this kind of a little bit backwards in terms of, like I said, Shanahan did the zone, run the zone to set up the play action to then set up the drop back pass stuff. This is kind of the other way around, where they're running a flea flicker here, and what you've got is 2x2 formation. You've got two receivers down here in a stack set. You got the tight end to the right. You've got a Z receiver out here, and he's going to motion down, and they're actually going to hand the ball off. And what it's going to look like is an inside run with the receiver coming in trying to block this strong safety that's in the box. And that's exactly what they want. They want this strong safety in the box. They want to make it look like he's trying to block him. And I'll run it on here, and you'll see that receiver comes in short motion, and he's now looking. This safety's alert to possibly being cracked by that receiver. So he steps up and gets in the run fit, and then the running back chucks the ball back to Jared Goff. Everyone's bitten up, and suddenly this receiver can just take off down the field and is wide open, and Jared Goff finds him. So that's a nice little trick play with the flea flicker. And again, the idea is you get that safety thinking he's being blocked by that receiver, bites up, and that sets up the shot over the top. But Ben Johnson then builds on that. So later in the game, you come back to the exact same look. You've got those two receivers stacked at the bottom here. You've got the tight end to the right. You've got the Z receiver outside, and he's going to motion down. And the Seahawks know that look from before. So this strong safety, rather than being up in the box, he's back deep, because they're thinking, well, we've seen this look. We know what happened last time. We don't want to get beat deep. So he stays deep. And this time they just run the ball. So they have this receiver come in, and he's actually here to try and block the safety. And they just run a counter scheme with the guard coming out and kicking out the edge, like we talked about earlier. But they get a really nice run look. So they've got extra blockers in with the receiver coming in. They've got no safety in the box. The nickel's out of here. This corner's kind of in, but he's having to fit because of the receiver. So they get a nice 5-6 yard gain. You'll see from the end zone angle, this could have been a much bigger run as well. But you've got the safety back deep, thinking about the receiver, trying to crack him, and thinking about the receiver possibly running back on that flea flicker, and so he's holding his position. And what you get here is you get the right tackle blocking down on the, or I think it's the right guard actually, blocking down on one of the defensive tackles. You get the right tackle blocking the linebacker, and you get this crease where it would have been the safety that on the previous play would have been in here in the box ready to stop that. But because of that previous play fake, that safety's now back, and you get this free lane where unfortunately this block just fails at the last second as I think as Montgomery's trying to get through the hole. So he just gets brought down. But if that block had just held for a second longer, Montgomery gets through there and he's in space on that safety. But even so, they still pick up 5 yards on the play. So that's a little kind of glimpse of the kind of packages that he puts together. And this is another little one where this play is a very common play.
I just want to pause for a second if you don't mind.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I was going to say, people are giving you a shout out in the chat, so I want to give you some credit on that. So for one, Yam said it's a dawn of a new era. You definitely want to highlight that. Domo said definitely have to run the ball more next season, no matter who the coaches are. Go Durs is celebrating you, man. It says Mark is the good at breaking down plays for the average people to understand scheme and subtleties. So thank you, Go Durs. And he also said, tell Ben Johnson to bring Jonah Jackson with him. We definitely want some more offensive line investments. I agree with that for sure. So I like that one. So
maybe Jameer Gibbs too, huh? Yeah.
Yeah,
and also for all of you watching on Twitter, you can be in the chat now with Twitter. That's something new. So we hope all of you will jump in the chat, tell us what you're thinking, because we appreciate it. So go ahead, Mark.
Yeah. So this is another little package of this time. Instead of having a run and a run fake and a pass and that kind of stuff, this is 2 different passes but built on top of each other and layered on top of each other. So the core of this concept is in the Kyle Shanahan system, it's known as arches. In Sean McVay's system, it's known as quick seam. Scott Turner and the old Air Coryell system would have called it F post. And essentially the idea is you have this tight end, Sam Laporta's running a shallow cross, and he's there just to try to drag coverage inside with him. And then you got Amon-Ra St. Brown running this little short post or quick seam route where he's kind of making it look like a choice route where he arcs outside and then he breaks inside into that space that is vacated by Laporta. And you've got a little clearing out corner route here from the outside receiver, but that's just kind of to vacate space. And they get to it they start with 4 receivers on this side with the running back aligned outside, and he motions into the backfield. So they motion him into the backfield, and they check the protection and adjust all of that stuff, and then they run this play, and you see Laporta comes across, and he's just trying to grab the attention of this guy, and that singles up St. Brown on this linebacker, and St. Brown wins pretty easily and is wide open over the middle for what could quite easily be a first down conversion. But unfortunately, as Goff makes his throw, it gets batted down at the line of scrimmage. But the concept called worked, and St. Brown, you can see, is in acres of space there. So Johnson, even though the result of the play wasn't great, the thing encouraging for me is that he recognized actually that worked, and it just got batted at the line of scrimmage. It was a bit unlucky. So later on in the game, they show the same look. As you see here, it's just flipped the other way. Again, it's a little bunch set here with a running back outside. He's going to motion into the backfield. So the defense, having already seen that look, they're again thinking it's that same arches or quick seam, whatever you want to call it, play. But actually they adjust it. And so we'll run it through, and you've got Laporta again is going to run this shallow cross across the middle. And again, that's just to vacate space, occupy linebacker inside and vacate space for St. Brown. And so they square it up, and you can see this guy is attaching to St. Brown's route, and he's sitting inside expecting St. Brown to break inside, as we saw even him do earlier. So what the adjustment they do is they have St. Brown run what's called a takeoff. So he fakes that initial route that we saw on the last play, and then he takes off up the sideline. And you see there is where he just goes to take off. He gets a yard on the defender, and there's quite a clear window to throw this. I'm not quite sure why Jared Goff goes back across the middle, but he could have quite easily hit that. But that's, again, it's a nicely schemed up kind of playing off the previous play, a nice little twist add on to the top of that. And they still get the completion, and Laporta makes a nice gain. But it was just a real nice little building on concepts, and even if the first play didn't go as planned because it was blocked at the line of scrimmage, Johnson was alert enough to realize, hey, look, actually that play worked, and we can still go back to that same look and make a little tweak here and there and pick up a potential explosive play.
So 1 second, Mark, let me just throw a little question in the chat real quick. So first of all, awesome. I love the fact, I think great offensive coordinators can like plan in sequence, kind of build up to a big play later on. So I like the fact that Ben Johnson is being creative, kind of showing that downfield vision, kind of working off each other, which is great. Gil Durs has a question for you. He says, Mark, what is the ideal type of player to fill the wide receiver 3 role in potential Ben Johnson offense with Terry and Jahan? If not a wide receiver 3, what about a tight end?
If he means wide receiver 3 is in like a slot receiver, or it's odd. The one thing that
complement Jahan and Terry, from what I'm gathering from the question.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, so I think in terms of roles within this offense, I think Jahan Dotson shares a lot of the skill set that a receiver like Amon-Ra St. Brown does, and then I'm actually going to get on to St. Brown here. So I would see Jahan Dotson playing that kind of role where he's kind of a Z receiver, kind of plays in the slot. They kind of move him around. Terry's probably just going to be the X receiver. And I think the big thing that Johnson does really well is he plays to the strengths of the players that he has, and he finds ways to make use of their skill set. And something that the criticism a lot of people and myself have had of Eric Bieniemy this season is that he's not individualized packages enough for the specific players that he has. He has this philosophy of like, well, we've got a bunch of playmakers. It doesn't really matter which one of them gets the ball, because they're all capable of making plays, and that's true to an extent, but it kind of limits the potential of every one of them. So what I like about Johnson, and actually as we'll see in this little package here, is he designs things specifically for the skill sets of his players. So this is a little thing that they've designed for St. Brown, and again, it kind of builds on the thing we were talking about with layering packages and building on plays, but we'll get onto that. So first we've got another little 2x2 set. This time the tight end is split off, and St. Brown is outside the numbers, but just before the snap, he motions into a little stack set with the tight end. And what he's going to run is what's known as a CO, or choice out, where it's a choice route stem, where he kind of arcs out and gets into the seam, and he looks like he can run the choice route where he can either break outside, inside, or sit down. But actually, it's got a mandatory out tag. And again, it's just because his route running ability to kind of square up defenders and break sharply is something that he does really well. So we'll run this one on here, and you'll see that's Marlon Humphrey there. And the Ravens kind of bail out of this into a zone coverage, and Humphrey kind of is distracted by this tight end running vertically, and you can see St. Brown breaking outside, and the linebacker inside kind of has to attach to that because he's the flat defender in this quarters coverage, and he breaks out easily, and it's a nice easy catch and 5 or 6 yard gain. So they come back to the same thing later on. You've got the same formation. You got again St. Brown aligned outside. He's going to motion in tight to the tight end, but they're going to add a little layer on top of it. So it's going to look like that exact same choice out, where he does that little choice route stem, breaks outside, but then he's going to pivot back inside. And you'll see here the Ravens are in a different coverage look. So Marlon Humphrey this time is going to come up and try to play some press, but when you've got a stack set, it's hard to play press. But he's going to try, and you'll see once we eventually get to the snap. Here we go. He's going to kind of jab step in with the press and try to run with him. St. Brown kind of gets a step on him here. Humphrey does a nice job of staying on top of the route and sticking with him. But because St. Brown is so quick in and out of breaks, when he pivots back inside, he breaks open, and then Humphrey isn't able to kind of adjust in the same time as St. Brown is. And unfortunately, St. Brown drops this, but you see him making this catch. Look at the space over the middle of the field that he's going to be running into. Yeah. And again, that's just go off of the layer of the first play where we saw he ran a little 5-yard out. It shows the look to the defense. They think, okay, we're getting the same thing again. And then suddenly at the last second, he pivots back inside and he's got all this space to work with. And I guess maybe he thought, was thinking about where he's going to go after the catch and then didn't focus on getting the catch. So, but that is the kind of thing that they'll run for St. Brown. And the nice thing about what Ben Johnson does is he doesn't just focus on one guy. He knows he has a bunch of different playmakers, and obviously the Lions this year, they drafted Jahmyr Gibbs at running back. Was it 12th overall? And that kind of surprised a lot of people, but the skill set is why the Lions liked him so much. And here we see him running this little choice route, and that's something that you see from running backs a lot. And it's something Chris Thompson in Washington used to do really well. And J.D. McKissick did it quite nicely as well. But yeah, you've got that same little arc release that we saw, and this time he has the actual choice where he can break outside, sit down, or as he does on this one, he breaks inside. And so we'll see that here. He kind of squares up this linebacker. This linebacker is thinking he's getting picked, so this is going to turn into some kind of wheel route. So he's doing his best to get outside, but of course you can see the middle of the field. That's where Jahmyr Gibbs wants to go. And he puts a little foot in the ground, a little stutter, gets inside, makes the catch, and picks up a 10-yard gain. Nice, easy first down.
Hey, Mark, I got a question for you.
Yep.
So would you describe Ben Johnson's offense as more like a short game or like a West Coast type of offense, or more vertical? Like, have you caught any major trends from what you watched so far?
It is a West Coast offense.
Okay.
I believe he does use West Coast terminology, but West Coast terminology can change quite differently between different systems.
Yeah.
Like if you look at Kyle Shanahan's West Coast offense and compare it to Sean Payton's West Coast offense, they're quite different with their terminology, even though there is some crossover. So I believe he's a West Coast offense guy, and so there is that. But the thing that I kept coming back to was it reminded me a lot of a Kyle Shanahan style system, and I had to actually look and see. I looked and was like, is he actually in the Kyle Shanahan tree somewhere? Has he worked with Kyle Shanahan or a Shanahan disciple at any point? And I don't believe he has. But yeah. So yeah, we see
the head coach for the Lions goes back. Dan Campbell goes back with Sean Payton. So. You kind of mentioned him earlier, made me think of that. I don't know if specifically he's from that tree, but I could see why there would be similarities, particularly working with Dan Campbell.
Yeah, I don't particularly know the answer to this. Mark, do you know the answer to this? If he's what particular tree he comes from?
We talked about that a little bit earlier.
Yeah, I haven't done extensive research into exactly who he's kind of been taught under. I just know that there wasn't a direct link to Shanahan or Sean McVay or that kind of thing, because as I say, when I was watching him, I was thinking this is very Shanahan-esque. So I was looking specifically for a Shanahan link and didn't see it, but I kind of ignored what other links there might have been. But yeah, so we see Jahmyr Gibbs make that catch on that choice route. And so the thing that I really like about what Ben Johnson does is he has those individual packages where we saw that little choice out with the little pivot back in for St. Brown, and then we saw that little choice route for Jahmyr Gibbs. But he doesn't just call a play and be like, okay, this play is for St. Brown, this play is for Gibbs. He will intertwine them and band them together and find ways to have plays where they're both running things that they're good at. So again, this is Jahmyr Gibbs running a choice route. This is St. Brown running a little pivot route. Again, making use of how quick St. Brown is in and out of breaks, and they add another little layer of it by having Montgomery on the field. So they've got two running backs on the field, and Montgomery's just going to swing out to the flat, and that is just to grab this linebacker and get him out of the way. But this is a really nice concept in the Shanahan system. They call it choice stucco, I believe is the term they'd have for it. And so you'll see it as we play it out here. You got a little choice route, and that's probably your primary thing. You're probably thinking you want to go to the choice route. And so the choice route comes out, and he's got two guys on him, the Mike linebacker, and I believe that's a nickel, might be a safety, is on Jahmyr Gibbs. And so when a choice route runner comes up with a guy inside and a guy outside, he can't really break inside or outside. He's got to sit his route down. So that kind of eliminates him. He could hit this, but Jared Goff knows that we've got something else coming out here. So here we go. So
nice.
We've got those two guys kind of jumping that choice route. You've got this linebacker, again, as I said, going after Montgomery, swinging out to the flat. And again, that's just to get this guy out of the way. And then you've got St. Brown running that pivot route. So had this guy not been in the equation, it's just the Mike linebacker coming in to try to guard Gibbs. Gibbs would have broken inside, and he would have had this space because St. Brown initially would have been pivoting outside, breaking outside, and would have been out of the way by the time Gibbs made that catch. But because Gibbs had to sit that route down, it buys time for St. Brown to then pivot back inside and use that space because Gibbs isn't using it. So effectively, that then turns Gibbs into the guy occupying this Mike linebacker and opening up this huge hole across the middle of the field. And we'll run it on, and St. Brown gets hit over the middle for a nice big gain. And you'll see from the end zone angle, from a quarterback's perspective, why this is so nice. Essentially, all he has to do is read this Mike linebacker and basically go, right, where's this Mike linebacker going? If he attaches to Gibbs, I can go over here to St. Brown. If he goes over here, if he pushes over to St. Brown, I've got Jahmyr Gibbs one-on-one on a choice route. And so you can see Jared Goff kind of basically stares straight at him the entire time. And it's like, where are you going? Where are you going? Okay, as soon as he sees his eyes right there go to Gibbs, he's like, right, okay, I can go back across to St. Brown. And he resets, hits St. Brown, and picks up a nice play. So that was kind of the different ways that he builds little packages of plays for his specific players and then finds ways to package those individual players together and sync in a nice whole well-rounded package of plays and make things kind of easy for the quarterback at the same time. So it's a really nice offense that I really enjoyed watching.
So Mark, to that end, right? So Jared Goff, I feel like he's kind of been like a battered quarterback in the league, right? People kind of discarded him in LA, sent him over to Detroit. He's been kind of polarizing. Sean McVay built him up, and now Ben Johnson potentially built him up. What's your take on Jared Goff? What do you think? How did Ben Johnson kind of highlight his strengths? And do you think what quarterback would potentially do well in the system?
Quickly, before you answer that, Mark, I went to Wikipedia real quick. So the tree is essentially Dan Campbell. Ben Johnson starts out at Boston College, then goes with Dan Campbell as a tight ends coach when Dan Campbell gets the interim job with the Dolphins, then stays with Adam Gase for another year or two, I believe, as Adam Gase is the Miami, and then goes to Detroit, I think in 2019 or 2020. So essentially, it's the Dan Campbell tree.
Right. Okay. Interesting. That's good to know. To answer your question, George, in terms of Jared Goff is an interesting guy. I think he has a ceiling, and I think McVay kind of took him to that ceiling and felt we're not going to get any more out of him. And obviously, that they got to that Super Bowl with him, and then he missed quite a few throws, and the Patriots kind of figured out how to defend him and that offense, and McVay felt like he needed to upgrade and went and made the move for Stafford, and obviously that is an upgrade. But Goff, even though he has a ceiling, he's still a good quarterback, and he does a lot of things nicely. And I think the thing that Ben Johnson has done really well is continued doing those things that Goff did well in LA. The play action shots over the middle, those choice routes are very frequent in McVay's offense as they are in Shanahan's offense, and that's probably a good deal of why I've been seeing that similarity to a Shanahan system, is because he's doing a lot of the things that Goff did well with McVay, and obviously the McVay and Shanahan systems are very, very close. I think the impression that I get of Ben Johnson, and obviously it's hard to say this is the quarterback he wants, because this is the only quarterback we've seen him coach. And so we don't know what, in his ideal world, who he's going to like. My impression is going to be he's going to see the skill set of whichever guy he's got, and he's going to try to adapt the offense to that skill set.
As he should, right?
Exactly, as every coach should. And he'll have his ideal kind of guy in mind, obviously, but I think he's helping Goff hit that ceiling that McVay was hitting, and so that's a testament to he was able to identify what Goff does well and able to replicate it in a different place with a slightly different system and different personnel that have different skill sets. So to be able to still generate a lot of the same looks and same reads for Goff is a testament to what he's able to do. So I've got a few more things that I've added on here. We've talked about the kind of thematic stuff where he's able to layer concepts on top of each other, and he's able to make packages individual, specific to the different personnel and the skill sets that he has. But he's also able to, as every coach should be able to, make things individual to the opposition that they're playing against. And so this was a nice example here. They're playing against the Bucks, and then the Bucks is it head coach now? Is it Todd Bowles? Is he the head coach? He's the defensive coordinator, certainly.
He's the head coach.
He's calling the plays over there, and he's known for obviously a heavy blitz package and liking to pressure the quarterback. And so on this third down play here, I think it's 3rd and 5, or maybe 3rd and 4. He's anticipating that Todd Bowles is going to bring pressure because that's what Todd Bowles is known for. So what he does is he goes to an empty formation. So he motions the running back out of the backfield. And what that does is it forces the defense to kind of show what their intentions are. They can't just have everyone bunched up and pretend like someone's going to blitz and someone isn't. They kind of have to match these receivers outside. You can't just leave guys uncovered. And so they kind of get an idea the safety's coming across to try to match the running back. The linebackers are all kind of, and the defensive linemen are all kind of sorting themselves out to stop trying to disguise things and get in position. And so once this all uncovers and kind of identifies itself to Jared Goff and the Lions offense, then they're able to go, okay, this is what we actually think they're doing, and we can adjust to that. So you see Jared Goff walks up to the line of scrimmage, and he's able to call an audible, and it could well be that this was something Ben Johnson was radio to him at the time, or something they game planned through the week that, hey, if we get this blitz look, we want to change to this play. I'm going to motion out to empty, and it's going to uncover stuff for you, and these are the handful of things that we want you to be changing to. And what they end up changing to is just a simple tunnel screen to that running back that they just motioned outside. And you get the slot receiver coming over and blocking that safety. You get the tight end blocking the corner, and you get the right tackle coming out and laying a block too. And so the Bucks were indeed blitzing. They catch them in that blitz, and obviously against the blitz, it's always nice to try to hit a screen over the top of it. And you see you've got, what is that, 5 defenders and a 6th there, all near the quarterback, and they've all been baited into that. And now you get all these offensive linemen coming out in front. You get the running back getting that screen pass, and you're getting this wall starting to develop where if he can get inside, he's got open field to hit. And at this point, you're thinking this is a touchdown. It doesn't quite turn out that way, but
if he went down,
it's obviously
he went to the right.
Exactly, it's still a huge play. So that is something again that was scheme specific to we know Todd Bowles is going to blitz us, so we're going to motion to empty. We're going to force them to kind of stop their disguise and reveal what their intentions are, and then we'll check to one of our predetermined plays that will work against that.
To your point, George, about Goff real quick. It's also, as we're watching these, it's nice to see a quarterback that's making, pre-snap decisions and looks and calls, and it feels like we haven't had that kind of line mastery pre-snap here in Washington for some time, and we'll need that going forward, no matter who the head coach is.
Absolutely. Here's a couple questions in the chat for you guys. So throwing it to the group, thoughts on a potential UNC connect with Ben Johnson in May. Mark, are there any thoughts of Ben utilizing a more of a mobile QB? Have you seen anything that kind of has a little tell in regard to that?
Not necessarily a tell in terms of a mobile quarterback. Jared Goff isn't a slouch, but he's not someone that you would necessarily involve in the run game with read options and stuff like that. I would imagine a guy like Ben Johnson that has shown the ability to adapt to the skill sets that he has, if they do draft a quarterback that has that mobility, that he would incorporate that into the run game, because why wouldn't you?
I agree.
It makes things so much harder. So I don't necessarily think that's something that he's definitely looking for in a quarterback, but it certainly would be a bonus to have. And I haven't looked at college quarterbacks yet. Once we get through this hiring process,
Exactly, that's exactly where I'm at too.
I am starting on quarterbacks as soon as we get through this hiring process. So
exactly.
And I've got a bunch of film on Caleb Williams and Drake May and Jaden Daniels all downloaded, ready to watch, but I'm too busy studying. I've been watching Bobby Slowick for the last 3 days. So
there you go. Looking forward to that one too. That'd be great.
Yeah.
So real quick, James said he loved that screenplay. So that was great. He said that would also work for Curtis Samuel, which I agree.
George, you mentioned Curtis Samuel. I agree with you. Of the guys that potentially could be brought back, Curtis Samuel would be on my list. He just does a lot of things that you like out of a wide receiver.
I think someone can use him better than the way he was. Like, you started to see a little bit more with Bieniemy this year, but I think he could be another level with another offensive coordinator. I agree.
I agree with that too. So I just talked about that with that specific kind of play for the Bucs defense, which is known for being a blitz heavy defense, and they had a specific plan for that. This is another example of a game plan specific thing. We've got the Seahawks here, and we all know the Seahawks are known for being that cover 3 team, and they're not quite the cover 3 team that they once were. They don't live in it 90% of the time like they used to, but they certainly still run it a fair bit. And obviously Pete Carroll is still the head coach there, and is still in charge of that defense. So they do still run a fair bit of it. And one of the most common ways to attack cover 3 is 4 verticals, because if you've got 3 defenders deep, if you have 4 receivers running deep, you should have one in theory open.
Numbers.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a numbers game. And so Ben Johnson went into this game going, Seahawks are a cover 3 team. I'm going to run 4 verticals, and I'm going to run it over and over and over. And he ran it. He found different ways to do it, but it essentially is all the same thing. And so we see here, we got that similar 2x2 set that we've seen quite a bit, with a stack set over to the left, tight end in formation, and your Z receiver just outside the numbers. You can have a nice little switch release here with the inside guy releasing outside and this guy staying inside, tight end going up the seam, and your receiver going down the sideline. So we'll run this. They actually get a nice little false start from the defense. So Goff knows he has a free play here. So we see the Seahawks do end up rotating back into a cover 3-ish kind of thing, where it's a cover 3 match. So the nickel's matching this guy, the safety is meant to be matching the tight end, and the corners are meant to be matching the outside receivers, with safety rotating back to the middle. But what Goff does, because he knows it's a free play, he basically goes, I'm going to my receiver here, and he's looking at him, and because that corner does a nice job staying on top of the route, he just says, I'm throwing back shoulder. It's a free play. It doesn't matter. I've got 5 yards anyway. Might as well take the shot. So he throws back shoulder, and that receiver does a real nice job peeling off and making that play. So that's one. A little bit later in the game, I think this was the same drive, actually. They show a little bunch set with 2 tight ends and St. Brown to the left, and they've got I can't remember, is this Josh Reynolds, I think, maybe to the right here, but in a condensed set. And what they're going to have is this tight end is going to motion across the formation, and midway through his motion, they're going to snap the ball, and they're going to have both tight ends kind of wheel out to the outside, and you're going to have both receivers running the seams. But again, it's 4 verticals. It's a different way to get to that 4 verticals look. You're going to end up with 2 guys on the outside and 2 guys in the seam, trying to attack that cover 3 look that the Seahawks like to run so well. And what you see is you get that cover 3. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4 underneath, and you've got 1, 2, 3 deep, and you've got 4 receivers running deep. And the issue that they're going to have here, I think it's Reynolds running up that seam. Goff makes a really quick decision here. He sees that this corner hasn't attached to Reynolds, and if he had, then he would have gone outside. But because the corner is kind of trying to play midway between them, he as soon as this safety doesn't turn and run with Reynolds, he decides he's taking that shot, and he makes a real nice throw, and he beats the safety, and he gets out the seam, and it's a touchdown. And then just another one, playing 4 verticals here. Nothing fancy about this one. We're just running 4 verticals. Again, they're getting cover 3. It's match. So because they're matching these slot routes, he just goes outside. And fortunately, the receiver made the catch. I think it was St. Brown made the catch and then fumbled it at the end, so they lost the ball. But it would have been a big play. And then
Mark,
this one.
question for you. You get a chance.
Yep.
So one thing I like about Frank Smith and with Mike McDaniel is there's a lot of like pre-snap motion and very like a lot of creativity with the motion before the play to kind of stress the defense. Do you see that a lot with Ben Johnson or not really? Doesn't seem like it, honestly, so far.
Not to the same extent.
Okay.
They do use motion. They use plenty of motion, but they use it for different purposes than what McDaniel and that offense does.
Gotcha.
McDaniels uses those motions to get those speed guys that they have, that Waddle and Tyreek Hill and then all of them. He uses the motion to get those guys a running head start and widen things out for them, to open things up for them down the field. Ben Johnson doesn't have Tyreek Hill. Not many people have a Tyreek Hill.
No one does, yeah, exactly.
So he doesn't do it that same way. He does it much more like a Shanahan or a Sean McVay kind of way, where they'll definitely use the motion. We've seen some motions in this where it's more to show a look or do it for a purpose. So like we saw with that in that flea flicker stuff, they had that receiver coming in motion, making it look like he was going to crack that safety, and then ran down the field. And then later, when they showed the same look, that receiver came in short motion again and did actually try to crack the safety that time, and then they ran the ball. So those will be the kind of purposes that he will use the motion for, is to show a look and make the defense think, I've seen this before, I'm doing this, and I know what's happening, and then he'll pull the rug out from underneath them with a little twist on top of it. So that's kind of how he uses motion a little bit differently. And yeah, this was another version of 4 verticals. They go to empty, they've got the running back out here, and he's going to run a little delayed under route, and that's going to be the little check down, but it's still 4 verticals is the main idea. And I think Goff hits this again up the seam. Yeah, he's driving this up the seam. The safety tries to attach, but he takes outside leverage, and so Goff drives it up the seam, and it's a real nice catch by St. Brown.
That delayed,
and there's one more.
That delayed angle route, real quick, Mark, on the last one that you showed, was that?
Yep.
Did they use that like as a fake screen, and then he runs that angle route?
Yeah, it
See how he
certainly
stops?
could
I was
interpret.
surprised. It's not an immediate into the middle of the field. He waits there, right?
Yeah, the idea, it's not necessarily to make it think like a screen. It's more to hold a flat defender.
Okay.
If he pauses there, whoever's in the flat has got to try to respect that. But obviously these guys are going deep, and there's 2 guys going deep, so the flat guy is going to preferably go back. But you'll actually see, I think this is the flat defender does try to go to attach to him pretty quickly, which leaves this linebacker trying to attach to the seam. And then the linebacker tries to pass it off to the safety, and that takes the safety out of position for this guy. So it's a really nice design, and he could have quite easily, with this safety turned back trying to go this way, he could have quite easily flipped his hips and thrown that ball to that seam route. And I think this guy comes open underneath as well, so he probably could have hit that as well, but he hit St. Brown nicely. And then again, I think this is like the 5th or the 6th version of this. But again, it's just
straight vertical. He doesn't care. It's awesome.
Yeah,
it's
we know what the Seahawks are doing. We're going to keep running it. We're going to keep throwing it. And again, he rips it in the seam to St. Brown, and St. Brown couldn't quite cover. I think the DB made a nice play, so might have jumped it. But yeah, that's me out of clips. But yeah, that was kind of my look at Ben Johnson. I think the things that really excite me about him is he does a real kind of Kyle Shanahan style of layering concepts, where he'll show one look and have a number of different plays built off of the same look, and he'll layer them on top. So he'll do the kind of, as we talked about with Kyle Shanahan, it's the wide zone into the bootleg, into the screen, into the drop back pass. he does those same kind of things just in a slightly different way. And then he also has, as I said, those individualized packages where he's got stuff for St. Brown, he's got stuff for Gibbs, he's got stuff for Reynolds, he's got stuff for Laporta. But he finds ways to mesh those things together. So it's not just you're going to St. Brown on this play, and if he's not open, then this play's bust. It's you can go to St. Brown on this play, but if he's not there, then Jahmyr Gibbs is probably going to be there. Or if they're not there, then Laporta is probably going to be there. So he meshes all those different combinations really well. And then he's got those real nice answers to specific defenses, like we saw with that undisguising of the blitz from the Bucks, where they hit that screen by going to empty and seeing the blitz coming, and then knowing the Seahawks love to run cover 3, so we're just going to run 4 verticals all day at it and hit a bunch of explosive plays. I think there's a lot to like about Ben Johnson, and for me it was pretty clear to see why he's one of the kind of top names in this hiring cycle.
Have you been surprised of the names that we see? It has been a lot of defensive coordinators on the head coach list that they're interviewing. I believe it's so far as Ben Johnson and Slowick are the only offensive coordinators on the list so far. I'm a little surprised by that. Are you, Mark?
No, not necessarily. Obviously, there's always that debate of you want the offensive mind in an ideal world. You want the offensive minded guy to pair with the quarterback, because in a perfect world, when you have a defensive minded coach, the offensive coordinator is going to get hired away, and then your quarterback's having to learn a new system every 2 or 3 years. But there's plenty of teams in the league that go with that defensive minded guy and have worked pretty well. Belichick for years, and now obviously that's a unique situation with Tom Brady essentially running his own offense. But the Ravens for the last decade have had John Harbaugh, and he's a special teams guy who also did some defensive stuff. So he was an offensive minded guy, and they found ways to cycle through different coordinators, and Lamar Jackson's still pretty good, so they're doing all right.
He's all right. Yeah. Fantastic.
So the way I've kind of been saying, I said it on a podcast the other day, for me it's kind of like in the draft where you're drafting for need versus best player available. In the draft, you're not going to take a second round talent that is a position you need over a first round talent. You're going to draft a first round talent. And when it comes to hiring a coach, you're not going to turn down the best head coach available just because he's a defensive minded guy. You're not going to go, well, we need this offensive guy, but he is significantly worse as that overall head coach than Mike McDonald or Raheem Morris, Dan Quinn, whatever defensive minded guy you want to talk about. If they feel that is the best guy to be an overall head coach, and there's so much to being a head coach than just scheme,
right.
Which is an important thing to note consistently, that I love what Ben Johnson does offensively, but that's only a fraction of what a head coach does. And so the system is great. I can't speak to what he's like as a coach or as a leader. It sounds like he's good from different reports, but you never really know unless you're in that building. I think the guys that we've heard, like Mike McDonald, Raheem Morris, like Dan Quinn, those guys have kind of proven over a long time now that they're really good leaders, and that tends to be the number one quality of a head coach. So I'm not surprised that those guys are in the conversation.
I got a question for you, Mark. We've been doing, every week we do this scoring. For one, all viewers, I appreciate all the comments. You guys have been fantastic. Every Tuesday we're on here at 5:30. We've been grinding Eric Bieniemy's film all year long. Is there any way that you want him to stay in DC? Do you have any preference or love for him, Mark, or do you think Ben Johnson is head and shoulders better than him? What are your thoughts on that?
I have an affinity to that Shanahan style of offense because that's the system that I kind of learned football in. So Ben Johnson is the best non-Shanahan tree guy at running a very similar system that I've seen. So I really like, in terms of the system overall, I really like what Ben Johnson does. In a world where maybe Ben Johnson is not the best head coaching candidate, he's a great offensive coordinator, but maybe maybe he interviews poorly, or they think he's not the greatest leader of men, or whatever scenario it is, and you go with a defensive-minded guy. If that defensive-minded guy doesn't have a offensive coordinator in mind already, and they should, but if they don't, and they're willing to meet with Eric Bieniemy, another year of Eric Bieniemy wouldn't be the worst thing in the world in my mind. I know people are kind of done with Eric Bieniemy, and I certainly have my criticisms of him, as we talked about in this show. But if you go with Eric Bieniemy, another year 2 of the offense, not necessarily year 2 of Sam Howell as the starting quarterback, but I think he would do significantly better. We saw spells of him this year where he was really good and being really efficient, and this offense just requires a quarterback to be really efficient, because there is consistently receivers open. It's just not necessarily, they don't always scheme up so that it's always Terry or it's always Jahan. It'll be whichever receiver the defense is willing to give you is open, which again isn't a bad thing, but the quarterback can't get bored of taking those open receivers, and that was something Sam Howell didn't do very well at the end of the season, and that's why he struggled. But another year in the system, in theory, you'd think he'd be able to be more consistent with what he's seeing and the different reads and growing into it. And obviously, we all think they're going to probably take a quarterback at 2. But if you have Sam Howell in the second year under Eric Bieniemy, you're not necessarily rushing to start that quarterback straight away. Maybe you can give him time to learn the system and grow. And I hate to put the kind of Patrick Mahomes thing on him, but Mahomes has been very public about how great it was for him to sit behind Alex Smith for the 15 or 16 games he did sit, and learn from him. And he said he felt like he didn't really know football until after that season, and they felt like he learned so much. So a quarterback can definitely benefit from that. And I'm not saying draft a quarterback at 2 and have him sit behind Howell and Bieniemy for a year, but that there's a world where that isn't the worst case scenario, and so I'm not ruling out Eric Bieniemy as someone that stays on, but I think it would be as an offensive coordinator for a defensive-minded head coach rather than as the new head coach.
That was my thought behind it, yeah.
And that one's interesting because there's 2 sides to that, right? Because Peyton Manning has also said he found it invaluable that he played that first year. So I'm sure, depending on how you had it, right? If Patrick Mahomes had played the first year and it worked out well, then I'm sure he was happy he played the first year. Mm-hmm. A couple of things in the chat I wanted to clear up. I like Aaron Glenn too. As far as Vrabel, he doesn't necessarily align to me with the forward thinking that they keep telling us and like progressive nature of things. I think maybe that's why he's not there. I think also he wants more of a coach-centric type control. I've heard that floating around. The other thing to remember is when the Colts hired Shane Steichen last year, it was like February 14th. So while we're doing, I'll just say that to say for those still in the chat, like important to remember that while the head of football ops may very well get hired by the end of the week, the head coaching search will have plenty of time to do some more of these breakdowns because that most likely doesn't happen for at least another month. Mark, who will we be looking at next week? You got an idea for that? We're doing Slowick next week. Is that the plan?
Well, I've got a post going up tomorrow morning on Mike McDonald, Ravens defensive coordinator. I will have something let's
do him next then.
Yeah, that'll be
awesome. You want to do him next week?
Yes. Who is my personal preference for the job?
Okay. Well, we can do Mike McDonald next week then.
Good. All right, so that's what we'll do. And thanks everybody for being in the chat. I thought it was great today. Love the feedback. And again, if you have somebody in mind that you'd like to know, message one of us or just hit it in the comments, and we'll figure out a way to make that happen. Gentlemen, we will see you guys Tuesday.
All right, peace out, guys. Take care.
See ya.
George, we hit the button.